So I think we'll get rolling. I just wanted to welcome everybody to our panel discussion on helping your child transition to their new school reality. This is brought to you by Tri-Town Cares, which is an initiative by Madison, Chatham Borough, and Chatham Township, a coordinated initiative recognizing in the midst of the pandemic how everybody's anxiety, stress, the issues that they're dealing with has just grown demonstrably, and trying to connect people with resources that are available out there. I wanted to thank Mayor Connolly from Madison. He's on the line. He brought us all together for Tri-Town Cares. And Madison does host the tritowncares.org website, which has a ton of information. I would encourage residents after this to go online and look at all the resources that are available on tritowncares.org. I'll turn it over to Mayor Connolly for a minute.
Thank you, Stacy. Just a few words. So I do have to run out. I was mentioning before my younger son, so we're beyond the school age time, but the younger son's moving off to DC and we're having a final dinner. But I want to thank our panelists, Kara, Meredith, Mike, for coming on board. Stacy, thank you for all your work on this, and for all the work of Tri-Town Cares. You know, I pulled our group together April, maybe, I think late April, just as we started looking about, you know, knowing that or mental health was going to become a major area of concern for all of us, whether we're directly affected by COVID-19 or indirectly. And our group of volunteers, we been meeting weekly and just shifted to bi-weekly, and very dedicated, and from professionals to our elected officials and to other volunteers. And should be a great panel tonight, and wish all those parents that are looking forward to a very changing school year the best. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to give you some logistics, we do have about 40 people who are signed on to join the discussion. So in order to keep things orderly, we do have everybody muted, but we do have, if you look at the bottom of the screen, and if you don't see it, just scroll down and it'll pop up. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A box, is a second box next to participants. And if you click on that, you can put in questions, and towards the end, we'll have a Q&A process. We will have our three speakers present for about 10-15 minutes each. And then at the end, we'll open it to Q&A. We are recording the Zoom so that we can make it available to other residents after. I will not mention names when I ask the questions, and I'll try and keep it as anonymous as possible so that everybody's comfortable with that. As I mentioned before, tritowncares.org, there's a number of resources, and we will also, all of our presenters have slides and resources that they will make available on the tritowncares.org website afterwards. So I guess I will move into, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We're going to be starting out with Kara Maximo. Kara owns Maximize Wellness Counseling and Coaching. She spent many years in the healthcare industry in a variety of roles, from therapist, clinical supervisor, clinical director, pharmaceutical sales trainer, district manager, and since 2014, a small business owner. She completed her undergraduate degree in psychology from Rutgers University in '94 and her Master of Social Work from Columbia University in '96, with a specialization in health, mental health, and a minor in law. She's a licensed clinical social worker in New Jersey since '98, as well as a licensed professional coach since 2013. She also holds certificates and postgraduate training in multiple therapeutic disciplines. So we're going to start with Kara, and she's going to cover managing back to school anxiety in a pandemic.
Thank you so much. I always cringe when I hear a bio, so thank you for doing that. So for those of you I don't know, my name is Kara, and we're going to talk about managing back to school anxiety. I'm a mom in this community also. I have two kids that as of this moment are going to be going back to school, and I know that that might be changing and things are constantly moving and changing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And I'm just kind of checking the time. So I put this picture up as a way to start off with what I've been feeling. And even though I can't get a show of hands from people that are in the audience or listening to this, but I would bet that a lot of people are feeling really similar. Starting school in person, starting school online, homeschooling, all the different options are in front of us, and none of them seem perfect. None of them seem ideal. So the real reality is there really is no ideal solution. And that's hard for a lot of us to understand when it comes to uncertainty. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that people are saying, hey, we're all in the same boat, everybody's in the same situation. And I would say we're not necessarily in the same boat. A lot of us, we're all in the same storm, right? COVID-19 and the school closings and then the schools opening and partial opening. It's like a big storm that we're all in right now, and we're all in a different boat. And depending on how we're handling this situation really depends on what lens that we're seeing the situation through. What are the things that are going on in our situation, in our household, and how we're managing that? So it's really important to take a look at that, because what's happening now is we all have really strong opinions. At least I know myself, my neighbors, my friends, we all have really strong opinions about what it's going to be like going back to school. And there really is no ideal solution. I don't think there's any perfect way to do it. That's why you have some school districts that are doing half days, some are doing full days. Right now in Chatham, we're doing, at least as of yesterday, we're still every other day, right? Plan B is kind of where we are. Other towns around us are doing things differently. So I want us to take into consideration there are a lot of factors that are affecting the lens in which we're seeing this decision. So for some of us, there's people in our home at all different ages, right? We may be living with multi-generations, maybe worried about the health of those in our family. There may be people with autoimmune issues, some people who might have had COVID. And then there's questions of, what does immunity look like? Do we have immunity? Do we not? The social and mental health needs of our kids. Some kids require different levels of socialization, mental health needs, academic needs. The ages, I mean, I look at my situation and my kids are middle school and high school. And so I'm looking at it from that perspective, but somebody who's got a second grader or a first grader or a kindergartner may be looking at this completely differently. And then there's work requirements. A lot of us are able to work from home, but some of us can't. Some of us are in positions where we can't be home. And what does childcare look like on the days they're home or not home? So really the key I want to get across right now is that we're all in a different situation and there is no one answer. So if anyone came to this saying, hey, I'm going to walk away with the one right answer, the key is that we need to let go of any judgment that we have towards other people's decisions, other people's, how they're choosing, right? Because there's a choice for people, whether they want their kids to stay home or not, and really focus on kindness and compassion for other people. So I want to talk about anxiety and fear. Anxiety and fear are kind of normal, right? Anxiety is an emotion or a way that our brain protects us from danger, right? In this picture here, it's a caveman running from a saber-toothed tiger. If we weren't anxious or we didn't have that alarm system to tell us that something's wrong, we could be in a lot of trouble. So it's a matter of safety, right? So if you think about it, it's an adaptive response to danger. If I was standing in the middle of the street and a truck was coming, if I wasn't a little anxious, I probably wouldn't get out of the way fast enough. So we have to understand that there's some level of anxiety that's coming from an adaptive response to help keep us safe. And in this situation, everyone has a different tolerance for risk. So think about like riding a roller coaster. There are some people who would never ride a roller coaster. They're too nervous. That's a risk they don't want to take. And other people are willing to jump out of an airplane and go skydiving or parasailing. We all have a different understanding of what our own tolerance for risk is. And it's important that we keep that in mind as we move forward. What I would ask is when you look at the risk benefit for your family, focus on what's in your control. A lot of us are feeling a little out of control, and that's understandable, but we want to focus on what's in our control. So I want to kind of use this as a little example of how our thought process happens when we feel ourselves in a situation that doesn't necessarily feel comfortable. So this is a CBT pattern. So it's a situation happens, then we have a thought about a situation, an emotion, and a behavior. So I want to use a simple example. You know, a lot of us, we're all social distancing as much as possible. If you're starting to have outdoor contact with someone, suppose you were to go to an event, outdoor, maybe 5 people, and you see a neighbor that you haven't seen in maybe months. You walk over to them, and as you walk over, they walk away. The situation is they walk away. And I would ask you to think about how would you feel in that moment when they walked away? Most of us respond with, I would feel rejected, I would feel sad, I would feel put out. But if you look at the situation, the thought that you had when they walked away was something along the lines of, they don't want to be seen with me, they don't like me, they are angry at me for something. And then your emotion kicks in, and then a behavior. But if you really backtrack that situation, what if you thought to yourself, they didn't recognize me with a mask on, right? We're not used to seeing people with masks on. Maybe their phone rang in their pocket and they went to answer it. Maybe they went to go to the bathroom or didn't even see me coming towards them. All of those thoughts cause us to have a more neutral emotion. And that's just something that we want to keep in mind right now with all this uncertainty and fear and anxiety and worry about going back to school. I really want us to check in with not just what's happening, because there is no ideal solution or answer, but really how are we interpreting it? What lens are we seeing this through, and how are our thoughts affecting our emotion? And I'm going to give you just a couple of tools on examining your thoughts and recognizing that they are not truths. You know, in that last scenario, if the thought was, they don't like me, that's why they walked away. If we thought that was a truth, we would feel awful. But if we were able to recognize that the truth might have been that they didn't recognize me, that's a completely different situation. And we're going to get a completely different feeling and a completely different reaction. So one of the first tips in kind of recognizing and getting more understanding or control of our own thought process is name the thoughts, right? There's a lot of times it's a cognitive distortion is what they call it. Could be black and white thinking, overgeneralizing, personalization. Those are all types of cognitive distortion. So that when we have a response to something, if we can ask ourselves, let me name that thought and see if I can better understand it for what it is, which is just a thought, not a truth. Another tool I like to use is the idea I'm noticing, I'm thinking. So if we were to say to ourselves, let's say we're having a thought like, I can't believe my kids have to go back to school. I'm feeling really scared. I know they're going to get sick and this is just going to be awful. This is going to be awful. You said that to yourself, how would you feel? You'd feel overwhelmed, you'd feel scared, you'd feel frightened. But what if you were to put the words, I'm noticing, I'm thinking that this is going to be awful in front of the thought? Does it take a little bit of a separation between the actual thought itself and the situation? So I'm noticing, I'm thinking creates enough of a separation for us to not get completely engulfed in that thought as if it was a true and if it was real. Another tool is to examine the evidence. Really asking yourself, okay, so let's really look around. And I'm going to think of an example. My son had a cold last week, and I definitely had a moment of panic. I took him to the doctor. I went for the COVID test. COVID test was negative, but for, a day or two when he was not feeling well and had symptoms that concerned me, I had to examine the evidence. And I had to keep saying to myself, we weren't in contact with anyone that we knew that had COVID. I do know that there were several kids that he's friends with that also had colds. So I was looking at the evidence. I also examined the evidence and said, well, no one else in my house has any symptoms. And even though I know that's not end all be all, I was looking at the evidence to manage my anxiety for the 48 hours before the test result came back. So being able to really check in with your thoughts and kind of look at the big picture. Because, in that last slide, when I showed that picture of the caveman and the saber-toothed tiger, our brains are designed to try and keep us protected and safe. So we have a negativity bias, and we naturally look more towards the negative than the positive. It's actually been shown in positive psychology research to be about a 3-to-1 ratio. So it's something to keep in mind that our go-to automatic is to fill in the blanks with information that's much more negative than the reality. Another trick I like to use, or tool I like to use, is to ask myself, what's possible versus probable? A lot of things are possible, but are they really probable? So when we start to worry and get anxious, if we ground ourselves and say, what's possible versus probable, we can take a more realistic look at what's happening. And then another one is the what ifs, right? What if this happens? What if that happens? Can you ask yourself, well, what if it works out? What if everything's okay? What if, and then ask yourself what you want to see, and really focus on that. And I'm adding on here 2 pictures. And for anybody who wants, Mood Tools and Fear Tools are 2 really great apps that you can download to your phone that actually provide in the journal section, step-by-step cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT thought process, where you're able to look at the situation, your thoughts, your emotions, reframing. It defines cognitive distortions. It's really a great tool for us to kind of check in and look at what's happening in our own thought process. A couple of other things before I finish up, because I know, I've got other speakers here that want to come in and talk about this, but managing uncertainty, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? What's happening right now could change tomorrow, right? As of last week, we were starting school the 31st. Now we're starting school, at least here in Chatham, on the 8th. Things are constantly changing and there's a lot of uncertainty. And be able to understand that managing uncertainty requires focusing in on what is in your control. So the first thing is, what's my why, right? What's important to me? What are my values? And how do I stay in line with my values? How do I make sure to focus on what's within my control and what's important to me? Another tool is just practicing gratitude. Writing down 3 things that you're grateful for is a great way to really refocus, right? That we talked before about that saber-toothed tiger that's in the bushes, ready to come pounce, and we're constantly scanning, looking for what could go wrong. We're not always focusing on what's going right. So by focusing on things that you're grateful for, you're able, and that's a great exercise, especially for those of us with little kids on the line, to write down, what are you grateful for every day? Maybe a letter. Another thing I like to use is writing a thank you letter to somebody who's been helpful or supportive, a way to say thank you. Self-care, exercise, diet, it's really important. I know the gyms are not open. There's still ways to exercise, managing diet. How much you can take care of your self-care is going to be really important going into managing an uncertain and unknown of what's going to happen moving forward. Another self-care tool, meditation. I'm a huge proponent of meditation. It's part of my daily practice. The picture that's on this slide is the folder on my phone of the meditation apps that I use, at least one of these on a daily basis. And these are the ones I recommend. There's some great resources on here just to practice just a few minutes a day to help me ground myself. And I recommend to my clients all the time. Another really good website is selfcompassion.org. And if we had more time, I'd love to talk about what that means and that practice. But if you go to selfcompassion.org, there's some really, really helpful resources on how to practice self-care from an emotional health perspective in a practice called self-compassion. Another one is routine and predictability, right? There's not a whole lot of predictability, but what can you create in your own home with your kids? How much routine can you create? Having the workspace that they're using for school where you're working from home to be consistent every day, having set times, right? It's going to be different moving forward than it was in the spring. In the spring, the kids were not on a schedule. They were doing work. They were given work for the day. Now there's going to be more of a routine. So that can you keep a consistent routine and predictability within the household, even on days when they're not necessarily in school? And support system. Know who your support systems are. Know what other families, friends, people in your life that you can rely on and count on that is your support system. And then keeping good boundaries between work and school is another key area, especially if we do wind up moving into all homeschool. It's going to be really important to keep that boundaries and have that set time where you're like, okay, we're in work mode, we're in school mode, and what does that look like? And that can help manage some of the uncertainty to have some sense of predictability in what's going on. That's all I had prepared, but I just wanted to say thank you guys, and I'm happy to answer questions after everybody gets a chance to talk a little bit, or if anybody has any questions just about anxiety. And anybody can reach out to me anytime. I'm local. I'm right here in Chatham. Please feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Kara. I'm glad we're taping this because I'm going to make my kids watch it after. So we're going to have Mike Eklund now from Project Community Pride speak about helping your child develop coping strategies for uncertainty. Mike began his career as a licensed counselor working with the State of New Jersey Department of Children and Families Children's System of Care. He worked with families throughout the state and children of all ages and adults with a range of intellectual and developmental disabilities. Mike has a background in psychology, applied behavior analysis, and mental health. Mike earned his Master of Mental Health Counseling from Monmouth University. Mike, thanks for helping us out here with this presentation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I actually prepared a slideshow. However, I don't know how to present a slideshow via Zoom, so you have to forgive me. So is it okay if I just do a little bit of a talk?
You're muted, Stacy. But if Michael, if you go to share screen, if your slides are up behind the Zoom, it should come up if they're already open on your desktop. If not,
oh no, I don't even have them open.
Okay.
Yeah,
No
I'm gonna have to wing it a little bit. I apologize to the participants of this panel.
Oh, that's fine. I'm sure it'll, you know, like I said, that's why it's great that it's being recorded. If they miss anything, they can go back and watch it later.
Yeah.
And we will have your slides up on the website also.
Oh, great. Okay. So for anybody who's interested in obtaining the slides, please, yeah, go to the website. And just like Kara said, always like to encourage people to reach out. Like we are going to do a Q&A after this panel. So people can submit questions, but in case you have a question that maybe is, I don't know, too sensitive for the public, or you have something that's a little more in depth, a little, like I said, more sensitive, then please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll provide my contact information later, okay? So I think it's safe to say, Kara was speaking to the anxiety that a lot of us are feeling. Pretty safe to say most of us, right? I know I get some anxiety sometimes, and this is something that we're seeing a lot with our clients, the children, the teenagers that we work with, and their families as well, parents. So when I was first invited to speak tonight, I said that I would really like to speak to this idea and feeling of uncertainty, because things are changing so rapidly, as Kara was mentioning, with whether or not the students are going to go to school, they're going to do a hybrid, or they're going to stay home. And each, I think, presents its own challenges for all the uncertainty and then some of the mental health aspects as well. So a little introduction into the feeling of uncertainty. We crave security as people, right? We want to feel safe, have a sense of control over our lives and well-being. And this uncertainty is, I think, safe to say, making us feel stressed, anxious, and powerless. It's draining us emotionally and trapping us into what ifs. It can be exhausting. So I would like to first offer you some broad approaches to coping. So we need to understand and accept what is happening and normalize it as much as possible. We can practice what feels unfamiliar. So for me, that'll be doing a slideshow on Zoom next time. I need to practice that. But I do think that's something that a lot of the students have experienced, is just stress over some of the, distance learning and the technology, and getting used to being connected with their teachers and their peers, and just their friends overall. So we need to preserve what was normal to us pre-COVID, and we need to evolve as we can. And that's happening rapidly. And along the line of what Kara was mentioning as well, finding a new balance. This is a great opportunity to kind of reevaluate, to look at things through a new lens, and to kind of reprioritize. We know the importance of education, and that's what we're dealing with in the next week or two, but also mental health. Recently, myself and another member of our team did a training for one of the school districts, and we were just stressing the importance of mental health this upcoming school year, because what has happened in the last 5.5 months is that we've seen increases in anxiety, increases in sadness. We've seen people who are lost focus because they weren't engaged in their life the same way that they were. So whether it's just because they're spending so much time at home, I work with some people who have not left their homes in much, maybe to go grocery store shopping in the last 5.5 months. but they feel out of touch and they feel isolated. And they are missing that connection. And if I can speak a little bit to specifics, if I think about somebody who I've worked with who pre-COVID was experiencing social anxiety, and now they haven't been connected in the last 5.5 months, they have some serious concerns about returning, in addition to the physical safety issues that can occur. So during this time, we need to experiment. It's trial and error, and recalibrating. So a little background for some typical child adolescent behavior. Begin to question authority. There's increased focus on physical concerns. They develop their own beliefs. Some have difficulty managing intense emotions, which is a lot of what we've been seeing. There could be impulsive behavior, both verbal and physical, increased peer influence, especially among teenagers and in middle school. And then struggle in identifying long-term consequences of their behaviors. So again, pre-COVID, there were, some things that are like red flags for somebody who's really struggling emotionally. And during COVID, some of them, as they return to school, will be ongoing sleep disturbances, intrusive thoughts or worries, including suicidal ideation, recurring fears about illness or death, and if they know somebody or somebody in their family was lost to COVID, and a reluctance to leave parents or to go to school. So I know that when I was invited to speak tonight, that people are looking for some specifics. You want some techniques or at least some ideas for you to get through this with your family, with your kids, so that you can try to start the school year as smoothly as possible. So you might say, how do I help? Well, one of the most important things that you can do is to have more conversations with your children. I know that can be a challenge sometimes because kids love to be on their tablets and phones and playing video games and etc. But whenever we have the opportunity to really connect and to make it part of the culture, whether it's the family culture, the school culture, this fall, we're going to need to really connect with each other. We're going to need to have each other's backs, so to speak. We're going to have to look after each other's mental health. Because if we do it as a community and we do it that way, then fewer people will fall through the cracks with their education, with their mental health, etc. So one of the best things that you could do to encourage your kids to open up is to listen non-judgmentally and really be open with the conversation. If they're having fears, you want to offer reassurance and continuing support. It's not a one-time conversation. You want to have these conversations regularly. We want to keep in mind that many children and teenagers are still coping with the loss of a loved one or changes in their safety, their relationships, and structure of their day. It's okay for you to express your concerns as well, because it helps make the conversation more relatable. If you're panicking, you might want to go in the other, go out and catch your breath and, take some deep breaths. And as Kara was mentioning, meditate a little bit, kind of find your center. But then it's okay to kind of keep it real during the conversation. If the child is younger, and maybe some of it is above their heads, we don't want to encourage anything that can assist them to have frightening fantasies. So we could be more open with children who are older, but maybe just kind of keeping it developmentally appropriate for the younger ones. It's so important to validate feelings, and depending on what type of concerns are raised, to evaluate whether a referral for professional counseling may be necessary. And we can maybe talk a little bit more about that during the Q&A. And once again, I'll offer my contact information in case you have a very specific circumstance in which you would like to share. Don't shy away from difficult topics. All types of things are going to come up. It depends again on the culture of the family. I've worked with families that are very open about talking about difficult things, and I've worked with families where not so much. So I want to encourage you to tackle some of the difficult topics this fall and set the tone. Again, just going back to being open, being non-judgmental, and allowing the conversation to flow so that the children can open up, share their feelings, and feel like they're being heard. Once again, this is also what we encourage in the school because as we see it on our team, we kind of joke around that this fall, teachers are also going to have the hat of being social workers in a sense. They're going to really have to put them in the students' shoes and to empathize with everything that we've all been going through. And if we don't address that, then it could make it more difficult to learn. So once again, it'll require that culture where people feel like they can really connect with each other, creating that culture where people feel connected, plugged in, and that their concerns and feelings are being heard. So some specifics. If you're looking for a few specific ideas about what to include in such a conversation, well, a few things to remember. So kids worry more when they're kept in the dark. That's why it's really important to try to keep it real, because the kids can sense when it's genuine and authentic. And so by taking that route, it'll really help to move the conversation along and get to the heart of the matter. Welcome their questions. Let them figure out what they need to know, what would make them feel better, what would make, help to put their mind at ease a bit. Offer fact-based information. I know at the beginning of this COVID that there was a lot of stuff going back and forth. And I think a lot of people were experiencing a lot of confusion because we weren't sure which facts to listen to. So now I think we've all figured out some of the better, more nuanced, fact-based institutions and information that's out there. We want to stay on top of it a little bit so that we can offer that to them so that they understand what's happening and then they can cope with that. If you don't know the answer, say, I don't know. It's okay not to have all the answers, but you just try your best. Again, depending on the age of the child, filter the news, right? So if they're older, they can understand a bit more, and they do. If they're younger, maybe they don't need to understand every last detail. But encourage them, once again, so important to share their thoughts, their feelings and concerns, and validate them. Let them know that you are hearing what they're offering and that you understand. And if you don't understand, just to, keep going until there's an understanding. So there'll be a focus on safety this fall. If the students are returning full-time or whether they're doing hybrid. We want to model coping skills for them. So I loved Kara's idea about meditating. I also encourage meditating a lot because it really helps people to find their focus on their center. And it helps them to get in touch with their feelings, which allows them to deal with what's happening. Limit too much television with frightening images can contribute to secondary trauma. We know that from after 9/11, that people who saw those images again and again. And allow them to grieve, right? I think we're all, or a lot of us, are still grieving, right? And because we're not out of it, because we've been in it for the last 5.5 months, we don't yet have that outside perspective, right? This thing is not behind us. We're still in the trenches, so to speak. So we just have to allow people to continue to grieve. And that just means going through those range of emotions that is associated with that process, right? And we want to build resiliency. right? We want people to feel that they could put one foot in front of the next, that they can deal with today and tomorrow. That even though this is not easy and we don't have all the answers and things are changing so quickly, that we can fortify ourselves a bit, so to speak. And that's kind of resiliency. It's the ability to cope with difficult situations and persevere in the face of adversity. And some components are social competence and pro-social values, optimism, purpose, and attachment to family, school, and learning, problem-solving skills, and a positive self-image. And so how do we do that? We help our children to create healthy habits and outlets, and we let them be kids. We let kids be kids. Okay, that's my offering for the panel. So I think Meredith is next up. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
We have Meredith Mason-Blount. She's the Executive Director of Nami, New Jersey, a leading voice on mental illness in New Jersey. Nami, New Jersey is a statewide nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of individuals and families affected by mental illness. I will tell you that there have been a lot of resources that have been referenced during the course of the discussions. Those will be posted again to tritowncures.org. NAMI New Jersey also has a lot of wonderful resources, so I would encourage you as well to go there. NAMI New Jersey, in conjunction with its 19 affiliates across the state, held more than 600 support groups, 310 education classes, and provided more than 260 presentations in 2019. Prior to NAMI New Jersey, Ms. Blount was the Senior Director of Youth Services for New Brunswick Tomorrow. Through this role, Ms. Blount managed the state's largest school-based youth services program, providing mental health counseling and youth development services to students in New Brunswick schools. So Meredith will be covering helping your child develop, self-care and when you need to be concerned. Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Kara and Michael, for those amazing presentations. I am going to share my screen really quickly, and we're going to watch this. Can you hear it?
We could see. I heard a little bit.
Okay, let me try it again. Sorry about that. I just
It's okay to think you're in a toxic relationship with the world right now.
It's okay to feel like your world is changing. It's okay if it's hard to find the words to express how you feel.
It's okay to feel like you just want to become someone else.
It's okay if you're panicking over an inability to control your life right now. It's okay to have trouble maintaining your normal routine while staying home. It's okay if you're feeling more cynical than usual.
It's okay if you want to pray more than you usually do.
It's okay to wear your favorite tank top several days in a row.
It's okay to miss your job. It's okay to just stay quiet.
It's okay to be depressed. It's okay to talk to your cats like they understand what you're saying. It's okay not to feel the most fabulous right now. It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
So I really love starting by sharing that video because it shows that it is okay. And it's so important for everything that Michael and Kara had just said, to acknowledge what we're all going through right now. And I'm gonna go ahead and start my slideshow. So today what we're going to talk about is self-care and safety. And so the number one thing to remember is that it is okay not to be okay right now. Everything that Kara and Michael have been talking about, you need to acknowledge where you are in order to be able to move forward. And with the schools coming back, virtual, hybrid, full, homeschool. There's lots of different options and lots of things we need to be aware of. So just so you know who Nami is, we're a statewide nonprofit organization that uses education, support, advocacy, and public awareness to talk about mental illness and mental health and how you can support those who are affected by it. And if you look where Nami is in the system of care, we are in just what we're talking about here: self-help, caregiver support, enrichment, self-development, and advocacy. So what is mental illness? And you heard a little bit from Kara and Michael about this, is that it is a disease or a condition that affects the brain, and it influences how you act and what you think and how people react to things. And this is before the pandemic. There is a crisis in children and teens' mental health in the United States. 1 in 6 U.S. youth ages 6 to 17 experience a mental disorder this year. By age 24, 75% of mental illnesses is diagnosed. And this is all before the pandemic. The pandemic has only increased both people who have had a diagnosed mental illness and those who hadn't been before. Prior to the pandemic, there were some reports that something like 1 in 12 people experienced anxiety. Now it's up to 1 in 3. And these are very real statistics that you might have in your own home, in your family, and definitely in your community and in your school. So these are just some of the common disorders that we see in children and teens. Obviously, depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsion, trauma, PTSD. These are things that are, these are some of the common disorders that we see in children and teens. As everyone said, all these slides will be on the website, Tri-Town Cares, as well as NamiNewJersey.org. So, but these are just some definitions that you can look at later about what some of these mental health conditions are. But with these mental health conditions, with the mental illness, it affects learning. It affects how a child acts in school or acts in a virtual environment or acts in a homeschool environment. And it affects their emotional readiness to present themselves in class, to present themselves in a Zoom call, how they handle the stress of trying to get on Zoom and all of a sudden your computer freezes. That happened to me like 3 times today. So how you handle that stress, how you interact with your peers in person and then virtually. There's a whole new world now with virtual interactions, how you can concentrate. All of these things happen when you have a diagnosed mental illness. But again, I just want to point out what's happening is that everyone's being affected by this pandemic. People who had never been affected by mental health conditions before are starting to feel the anxiety. We're up to 1 in 3, like I said. So we really have to look at how your child, like Michael was saying, is handling it and just acknowledge that it's going to affect how they are in school. And so one of the ways that we really wanted to, I say all that to say, to start to talk about self-care, to kind of get the framework. It's not as easy as, oh, let me go to the get my nails done as self-care. The first main step to self-care is to say it out loud. We have to acknowledge what's happening. We have to acknowledge what's happening to ourselves, what's happening to our children, what's happening to our community. Like Michael and Kara kept saying, we don't know. What we know today might completely change tomorrow. It happens so quickly now. So I love what Michael said about just be honest with your kids. If you don't know, say, I don't know what's going to happen with school. And just be honest and say, it's affecting me too. I'm stressed out. I'm feeling anxiety about this myself. Say it, talk about it. Make your home a place where we can talk about mental health conditions, talk about how it's affecting them, talk about how it's affecting their school. And this is one way we stand up to stigma and really get the help within the communities that we need. So this is, again, another way to look at self-care. Kind of catch yourself, like Kara was saying, what are you saying to yourself? Instead of critical self-talk, like, oh my gosh, I totally stayed off of the schedule that I made for everyone. I didn't follow it yesterday. Celebrate the small wins. Well, at least my 2nd grader did all his math homework. You know, find the successes in your own life, in your home, and celebrate them because it's not easy. We need you to acknowledge it's not easy and help yourself through the situation. So look at these things. Instead of trying to do it all, ask for help. Ask your older sibling, child to help your younger child. Ask your partner, a neighbor to help if you need the help. Just you have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And this is a key part in self-care. So look at these and try to think of, catch yourself like Kara saying, what am I saying to myself? How am I putting this into my life? Here are some self-care ideas. Again, we don't have to spend $100 on a massage, you know, because everyone has different restrictions as far as if they're comfortable going out, if they have the funds to do it. These are some really easy things to do self-care. And if you haven't experienced some anxiety, some of these things might be like, how is that self-care, right? I'm going to share a little bit about myself. When the pandemic was on, I had 3 kids, homeschooling while working. You know, you just kind of get on that hamster wheel, right? Get up, homeschool, get to work, catch up later on the emails, make sure there's dinner, everyone goes to bed, check emails again later, keeps going on that hamster wheel. My husband stopped me one day and he goes, Meredith, when's the last time you took a shower? And I was like, I just took a shower. He goes, when? And I said, I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him when the last time I took a shower was. And that could be embarrassing. I didn't see anyone. I was in my house. But that's what you need to do, is think about what you're doing for yourself. I was so concerned about getting up and getting the kids ready and making sure I was on the Zoom call and responding to emails and making meals and making sure everything around me, that I totally forgot to take care of myself. I wasn't making sure I took 15 minutes to take a shower. Make sure, maybe I went for a walk. Maybe I put on my meditation app and sit down quietly for a few minutes. So self-care is, again, it's self, what you can do for yourself. How can you take care of yourself? What I do to make me feel better might be different than what you do to make you feel better. But if nothing is better or worse than the other, everyone's different. So look at these things and say, you know what? I never thought about just lighting a candle and sitting quietly for a few minutes. That could help me. So find something on here or talk to your friends or family, like, let me think of something that could help. And again, some more self-care, physical, mental, and emotional. And again, right there at the bottom is one of my favorite ones that Kara mentioned, is being grateful. When things are so much a whirlwind around you, it's important to just stop and think, what am I thankful for? And sometimes it's just, I have a chair to sit in. I have a bed to lay in. Sometimes there's so much going on that it helps to just stop and think, what is it that I have right now with all of the mess that's going on that makes me feel better? So one thing, when we, in NAMI, we have a lot of support groups. We have webinars, education classes. And this is what, in our support groups, we have our principles of support. And these are really, really important because it focuses us on the issues. So look over these and again, try to take them into your own life. Some of these may not apply, but I think in general, a lot of them do. One thing is, we forgive ourselves and we reject guilt. No one has been through a pandemic before. No one we know in our lifetime has gone through it. We're all going through it together. You have to forgive yourself and reject the guilt. You have to say, okay, I missed the Zoom meeting at 1 o'clock today. All right, tomorrow I'll do better. We acknowledge, we accept that we cannot solve all the problems. So maybe I wanted my kids to go to school and now they're virtual. I can't solve that. I can't change it. I have to accept it. And now how do we move on? And one of my favorite ones is, we won't judge anyone's pain as less than our own. And I like throwing in there, or more than our own. So we are all in this together, but sometimes we have a way of belittling ourselves and saying, well, you know what? At least I have a house. At least I don't know anyone who's sick right now. But it doesn't take away the fact that you're still struggling. It's okay to struggle. You don't have to compare your pain to someone else to make it right. So give yourself the grace to get through this time. So if you go to NamiNJ.org, we have support groups, we have community resources, we have webinars, we have lots of different things to support you. So please, please go there. And do your self-check-in. Look at the scale. Say, I'm doing great, I'm amazing, I'm fine. And that's okay too. It's okay to be okay. And it's okay not to be okay. But really start to look at this and say, okay, if I'm struggling, how do I reach out? And that's when we start talking about when we'd be concerned. And I do want to put that this is a trigger warning. We are going to be talking about suicide and strong issues. So If this is a trigger for you or for someone in your home, maybe take a breath, take a walk, but we will, just to prepare yourself for the conversation. And obviously Michael and Kara will jump in as well. Some of the warning signs, if you know yourself or someone else is starting to get very affected by a mental health condition, these are some things that you should look for. Severe mood swings, feeling very sad, not eating, extreme concentration issues. So these are things that just mean that maybe something is happening that you need to be aware of. Now, to get more to the next step, these are some warning signs of someone considering suicide. Now, please be clear that this is not a list. You don't need to go down and check every single box. And this doesn't mean that this is everything that's on it. But, excuse me, we just want you to be aware of it. This is a very stressful time. Across the country, unfortunately, suicides are increasing. And it's just when you look around your community, your family, your direct loved ones, just to be aware of some of these things. Not saying that they always happen, these signs come up, but just to be aware. And it's different for every person. I have a teenager who, in the summer, he's sleeping till 12 every day. That's just what he's doing. So I'm not concerned about his sleep schedule. However, if you know someone who gets up at 7 o'clock, goes for a run, meets his friends to play basketball, comes back, does all these things, and all of a sudden he now is sleeping until 12 o'clock every day, there's a major change. Be aware of it. Keep in mind, if someone seems different, don't ignore it. Don't be afraid to ask. Pay attention when someone is going through a difficult time. Everyone is right now. Be aware. If someone has made an attempt and survived that attempt, continue to be there. Sometimes people get scared, like, I don't know what to say, and actually wind up alienating that person a little bit more. Let them know that you care, and tell them that you can be the person they come to share their thoughts, these scary thoughts that they have, because you're there for them. And just remember, you don't need to have all the answers. You know, you just think of ask, are you thinking about committing suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? And I need to be very clear on this. The language we use here is important, because when you say something like, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Sometimes what people think are, I'm not thinking of hurting myself because I am hurting. I am in a place right now where I'm hurting so bad that I think if I kill myself, the hurting will stop. And this is a very scary question to ask. I'm not telling you that it's not. I am not a therapist, and I've asked this question, and it's very scary. But maybe you want to lead up to it. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of killing yourself? And just to be clear, you are not going to put this idea in someone's head. If someone is not thinking it, you saying it is not going to make it happen. But somewhere between 50 to 75% of people who attempt suicide would have or did tell someone that they were thinking of it beforehand. So just a simple ask may open the door to having this conversation. The C is care. If you think someone is in danger, stay with them. Offer them help. Do not leave them alone. If they're in your house and you think that someone is possibly considering this, don't let them go to their bedroom by themselves. Go with them. Stay with them. Say, I want you down here in the living room. Stay together. And tell the parent of the child if it's a child. Tell the partner of the person if it's an adult. Tell people in the family. Tell people around you. Look for help. And if someone's in immediate danger, you see that something's going to happen or about to happen, just call 911. You have to immediately intervene if something happens, if something is immediate. In New Jersey, there are some places to get help from these situations. If leading up to, not the 911. If there's a 911 situation, you have to call 911. If you go to NamiNJ.org and go to where to look for help, there's psychiatric emergency screening centers and EISS, early intervention or crisis intervention services. Call them, they come out, they can help, they can intervene, they can screen. The important thing is you don't have to do this alone, but you might be the person who knows who sees the differences that's happening. And here are some places to get help. There are a ton of resources here. So take a picture if you want. The Tri-City page is going to have the PowerPoints up there, as well as Nami, New Jersey. There's the Suicide Lifeline. There's a crisis text line. You dial 741-741-NAMI, and someone will get back to you immediately. The Trevor Project works with individuals identified as LGBTQ, and of course the Veterans Crisis Hotline. Please use these numbers. And I do have to say, if you call the wrong number, they're not going to not help you. So just call someone. And here's some more. Again, the crisis text line. There's another one I underlined here is mom to mom. This is if you are a parent, it says mom to mom, but dad can call. And you just don't know what to do. You think something's going on, you need help, you need to talk, you need to relate, call this number. Talk to them about what's happening. They can help you through it. Sometimes you just don't know what to do or where to call. Call this number. And for your kids, take a screenshot of this, tell them to put it in their phone. Here are just 3 text lines and call lines that they can do. The first one is the teen support line. You can see that the hours that they're open and staffed by youth under 23. Second floor is huge in New Jersey. It's based in New Jersey. It's a text line, it's a call line, it's a chat room. They are available 24/7. They're a huge, amazing resource. And this last one, Caring Contact. This is for adults and teens, so please reach out to them as well. These are some additional resources that you can use for yourself or for your family members or your children. So I'm going to stop here, and I'll turn it over to Kara and Michael to continue the conversation on safety.
I guess I'll so did Michael and Kara, did you have more on the safety topic that you wanted to address?
No, not specifically. Just if people raise a question during the Q&A, they could speak to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, same here. I would say the key point is don't be afraid to ask the question, because a lot of times being afraid to ask the question is, being.
Okay, so we'll open it up to questions. If you want to submit a question, you can just click on the Q&A down below and ask the question. I will ask a question in the meantime that was somebody had submitted earlier, asking about, trying to proactively manage kids' social interaction. That it's the ones that are going to school maybe have expectations it's going to be like it was before, which it won't. And the ones that remain staying home aren't going to have an opportunity to see their friends, or might be upset because, and it might be in many situations, there's kids that have to stay home, maybe not for their benefit, but for somebody else in the household. So it makes it that much more difficult, if everybody else or a large number of kids are going back. So how can any advice on what parents can do, around managing, I guess, kids being disappointed in the lack of the social interaction they're familiar with?
Yeah, I think Kara made a great point earlier with regards to risk, because I know that when the summer started and then there were officials saying that it was more or less safer outside, and that opened up a lot of opportunities for people. So I would agree with, it depending on people's tolerance for risk. Obviously, you're not going to go to a crowded indoor party. That's not feasible. But outdoor activities, going for walks, going to the park, riding bikes, playing sports, as long as the maturity is there to maintain the social distancing, and for the kids who've been inside more or less for the last however many months, some have been reaching out to their friends. Others, as I mentioned, if they experience social anxiety, and then it's like maybe like a middle schooler who's like just really coming on board with caring a lot about what other people think. And there may be like thinking a lot about how others are perceiving them, and whether they've been out and about this past summer. So definitely encouraging kids to maintain a social life in a healthy way. Again, just as long as they follow the guidelines.
Yeah. And Michael, I'd want to add to that to try to be as honest, age appropriate honest as possible. So I'm thinking about, I have a middle schooler and a high schooler. So saying to my middle schooler, you know, I know you're excited about going back to school. One of the best parts about being in school with all your friends is lunch. Well, there is not going to be lunch, right? It's going to be different. And being able to validate that they may be disappointed because it's not going to be what it was, say, you know, September of last year. So kind of having an open and honest discussion and being able to say, yeah, this is hard. I know before we talked about the idea of practicing self-compassion. And I think when you talk to your kids, you can go through those steps. So there's really simple steps. The first step is saying, this is really hard. Acknowledging and validating, this is not what we wanted, or this might not be what you wanted. Maybe it is what you want, but for kids who are kind of expecting to have like everything be back to normal at school, it's hard. And I get that it's hard. I know it's hard. It's hard for a lot of kids right now. You're not alone. A lot of kids are going through what you're going through. So what can we focus on that is in our control? What can we focus on that we are going to enjoy about school? What is the benefit when we do go to school of being able to just see kids in the hallway and kind of manage that? A lot of the socializing is going to take place, like Michael said, after school, maybe outside, right? Not necessarily in the classroom. You're not going to be eating lunch with your friends in this classroom. You're not going to see all of your friends. Half of their friends probably aren't there the same day that you're there with the way Chatham's schedule is. So it's about really managing that expectation and validating that it may not be the way you want it to be. And I understand that. And that's okay for it not to be that way. This is what we have to work with. And if we spend all our energy focusing on what we want to happen instead of what we can focus on that's good about what's happening, I would say that's just open communication, age appropriate for sure.
Thank you. I have a question. Do you have any suggestions for how to help younger kids, elementary and middle school, get some perspective about the sacrifices they need to make? I think it's harder for them to realize it's just one summer, 1 year out of their whole lives. As parents, it's a little easier to keep that perspective because we have more life experience.
I would say, definitely Michael, you're the expert on kids, but I would just say as an adult, it's hard for me to have perspective. I think recognizing if we're struggling and our older kids are struggling, then the little ones are struggling too. Because I think it's not easy, even as an adult, to be able to say, okay, it's just going to be this summer. It's just going to be this year. So kind of acknowledging that it's hard for everybody. Yeah, exactly. And just as we were discussing, maintaining those ongoing discussions, conversations, because that's how people gain perspective. It's just, bringing new ideas to the forefront through conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate where the question's coming from. And we talked about this before. You'll have some families that are more comfortable taking risks. So, those children might be going to each other's houses, which is a reality that we can't control. And you may continue to try to explain to your young child that, that's just not something that we're comfortable with in this household. So, I can appreciate where, it's a little bit difficult for parents, especially of younger kids who just don't know why some kids get to do stuff and, they don't.
Yeah, I think the younger the kids are, the less they're talking to each other too, which could be helpful. I don't know. But Meredith, I'm sure go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to also, don't want to bring in brain development in here, but, the brain doesn't fully develop until someone's 25 years old. And part of that development process is being able to see long-term effects, long-term, the bigger picture. So that's why, teenagers are more likely to do something impulsive and dangerous because they don't necessarily think about or even care, in that moment about what could long-term happen because they're in the moment. So I think to Michael and Kara's point is just to recognize it and say, yes, I get that this is hard because they might not see, like they're only 15, they've only had 15 summers. So yes, they don't get that they'll have more coming. It's what it is right now. And so to acknowledge it and say, yes, this is hard and I don't know why we're going through it. I you know, this is what we're doing as a family. Again, you know, there's no right answer. There's no right way to go about a pandemic. But just understand that those questions are going to come and keep coming because they don't have the perspective. They don't have the ability to see it like we do. And it's going to be hard to understand.
You know, I think all of us talked too about the looking for the gratitude and the grateful, and a couple of things that I was thinking with little ones, like fourth grade, third grade, kindergarten, little kids, right? It's hard for them to really understand. Being able to focus on what you can do with them and gain more family time. Like, I know that we don't want to do that whole toxic positivity of, well, at least we could do this, at least we could do that, but really looking at kind of what did you gain, right? We lost a lot, but what did we gain? I mean, I know for me, you know, my 16-year-old started painting. I mean, who knew she could paint? And I've watched a whole lot of Gossip Girl and Vampire Diaries, and I didn't think we could find stuff we had in common, but you know, it's been great. And just doing things together as a family that you wouldn't have done, especially for those that are little ones that are wanting to see friends, and friends might be getting together, but you know, in this household, being able to say, okay, what can we do as a family? What can I find that's helpful and fun and engaged and kind of within what we feel is our risk tolerance, right? Maybe it's one other family that we socialize with, and maybe that's what we do. Maybe it's 2 or 3 other families. Maybe it's a small pod of kids, whatever it might be that's appropriate, but focus on the positive that's coming out of it and what you can do instead of all your energy on what you can't do. Right? Instead of looking at the hole in the donut, let's look at the donut. Like, what can we do? What is available to us that we sometimes forget because of that negativity bias that's really, really strong, right? That developmental negativity bias is really powerful, and we have to consciously look at a different perspective in order to fight that bias.
That's really great.
I wanted to ask also, there was a lot of discussion about self-care, which was very helpful. When it comes to kids who are experiencing stress, is there anything in particular? You talked a little bit about meditation, physical exercise, gratitude. Is there anything for kids in particular that you like or would recommend or point people to?
I'm sure there's a lot. Go ahead, Michael. You probably have a lot of.
No, well, just a few ideas, but definitely exercise, service. So whether bringing food to a pantry or making get well cards, as Kara was just saying, as far as her daughter who's just took up painting, being creative. Creative endeavors are a great way to filter a lot of the negativity that we're feeling or you know, feelings. Finding reason for joy, right? Like she said, looking at the donut, having a dance party, while it's still warm, run through the sprinkler. I do think that a social life is important as far as it's possible, again, with that same idea that you limit it to, you know, your inner circle, or whether that's changed, 1 family or 2 families, that you kind of know what everybody's up to, and that they're also practicing safety guidelines in order to keep everybody safe. But it's important to be social. We're social beings, and we crave that if we don't have it. Reading, writing, going into nature. Nature is so healing, regardless of what somebody is going through, if it's COVID or anytime. Just going for hikes, if you like that, or walks, or, you know, sometimes just finding awe. And I went up to, what was it, Patterson a couple of weeks ago, because I heard there was a waterfall there. It turns out there's a beautiful waterfall in Patterson. Like, who knew? So just stuff like that. And, you know, some good old fashioned adventure, if you could manage it. Finding ways to celebrate.
And doing it with your kids, right? Exercise with your kids. So I'm a big fan of those. I like phone apps. So I have those little exercise apps. I put them on and I, you know, do like sit-ups, push-ups, running in place, whatever they tell me to do in my basement. But you could do it with your kids. Both my kids go out for a run now, which I never thought in a million years I'd see my 13-year-old, but he's been going out and going to and running. And in getting involved. And almost all of the meditation apps that I recommended all have content for kids, or just, if you just Google and YouTube and kids meditation, breathing exercises, like blowing out candles, they all have accessibility for kids of all different ages. A lot of those apps will even break down, you know, ages like 5 to 10, ages, you know, 11 to 12, and they break it down. So it's guided meditations for the right age group. So that's also something to do with them. Say, you know what, Mom, I would say to my kids when my son was little, I would say, you know, Mommy's really stressed out. I'm going to go meditate. You want to join me? And I would put on the meditation app. There's a couple that I've bookmarked that I know that he likes, and we'll go sit and do it together. He fights me on it now. Yes, he's 13, but you know, a couple of years ago, he would do them with me a little bit more often. So it's something, if you model the behavior you want to see your kids to do, they're going to do it. If you tell them to do it, they're probably not. So you want to model that behavior and do it with them. That's going to be the key to getting them to take care of themselves. They're looking to us to see what we do. And if we're not doing it, they're not going to do it.
Well, I think that's a great place to finish off. I want to thank you all for participating. This was really wonderful. If you have any closing comments, we'll just give you a minute each if you wanted to say anything to close out. You're good?
I would just echo both what Michael and Kara said, and just talk, have conversations as families, you know, really make this an opportunity to share a lot, whether you're talking about, you know, what's going on in school or what Netflix show you're going to watch together. You know, just take this opportunity to talk about everything and anything that you can. You know, I think that'll help a long way with a lot of what we talked about.
Great. Well, thanks so much for everybody, for all of our presenters, and thanks so much to everybody for joining us. If you have any other questions, or if you want to get the resources, certainly on tritownccares.org, but don't hesitate also to email me at sewald@chathamtownship.org. Certainly, I'd appreciate your feedback, and if there's other topics that you think that the community would be interested in hearing from our panelists in the future, that would be, you know, we'd be happy to try and see if we could accommodate that. So I guess that's a wrap. Thanks so much. And also, like I said, the recording will be up if you want to mention to your friends if they have an interest in what was covered. The recording will be posted on tritownccares.org. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.